Well, guys, so we're going to start now with the UV process of our low poly axe. Remember, we've mentioned this before. We're not going to be doing the high poly. We just need to do the low poly. And in order to do that, we're going to be using a tool called a UV checker. So if you navigate online, you can find this place. It's called uvchecker.vinci.xyz. This was done by, oh, I always forget about the name of the artist right here. There we go. Jorge Valle Hurtado. He created this not too long ago, and it's a very cool way in which we can create our own UV checker map. This UV checker map is a tileable texture that we can use to make sure that the way that everything is unfolding looks as nice as possible. So what I like about this is that there's a lot of like presets that we can use over here. Even down here, there are some presets that people have generated. I personally really like this one right here, which has like the round corners. And if you like one of these presets, you can just change the colors of this and get a slightly different effect. So for instance, if we go here to custom, we can just like select everything or different elements. I'm going to use the typical like rainbow one, this one right here. And I'm going to download this at, I think I'm going to download it as 4K. Usually when we work with weapons, you get like 2Ks for a weapon, but this is a tip that I was given when I was doing my portfolio again several years ago, and that is that if you can present your stuff in an even better like way, that's gonna be best for your portfolio. Later on, if you're gonna do this in game, you can just downscale the textures down to 2K, 1K, 512, like whatever they ask you to do. But it's always good to present things in the best possible way. So we're gonna grab this one right here. Let's go to our project again. Axe project, source images, and this one's going to be available for you. Again, if you want to donate, you can donate here to the site for our good friend Jorge Valle Hurtado. So let's go now over here, and if you guys remember, we had assigned a material to this axe. Originally, the object that had the material, I don't remember which one it was. It seems like it was this guy right here who had the clay material and everything else was connected to it. However, the thing is, actually it was the high poly that had it, right? So I'm going to grab, again, all of the low poly materials. And then at the end, the armor. And I'm going to say object, link transfer data, and we're going to link to materials. There we go. So technically, all should have the clay material now. There we go. I'm going to change the name, though. The clay material is no longer going to be the clay material. It's going to be called the UV check. And over here in base color, I'm going to assign a new image texture. And we're going to open, of course, our custom UV checker. Hit open. So if we go now to the material preview, you're going to see that we have absolutely horrible UVs. Look at this. So some of the pieces like this, guys, have distorted UVs. The ones that are black have absolutely no UVs, and that's the stuff that we're gonna be like solving. So let's start with a very simple piece. This one right here. We're gonna start with the basic like head of the element. And the big question is, do we need to do any cut? Do we need to do like anything to this thing? Well, we need to create some basic UVs. So I'm gonna go to face mode, select all of these guys right here. Let's go to UV editing so we can have a little better control. We can always change this to material preview as well. Remember that each of this is individual. There are individual viewports, but we can do pretty much this exact same element. So I'm gonna grab all of the things right here. Just gonna make sure that we don't have any weird thing. Those faces still look a little bit weird to me, but that's fine. So once we have this, I am just gonna say UV, and we're gonna do a project from view, which is gonna take a quick picture of the axe. And look at that. That already is looking quite nice, right? We're getting this very, very cool effect, and we're getting a nice UV over here. Of course, we're not like perfectly using everything that we need, but we're getting a nice result. Once we are here, by the way, here on image, we should be able to change the size of the image. I don't remember where it was. I'll show you in just a second. I think it's this one right here. Yeah, so right now we're using this custom UV checker right there. Okay, so now that we have this, we can just say UV and unwrap. And as you can see, that's going to give us an even better distribution of the faces. Yes, it did change the proportion. We can always just like rotate this back. We can even scale it a little bit. But the thing is, as you can see, we're getting some weird cuts. For instance, we got this triangle right here. It's getting a little bit of a weird cut. And we need to find where the triangle is. It seems to be this one right here. Is that a problem? Not really. But we could definitely fix it if we wanted to. That one is like going continuously, and that one's going continuously. There we go. Now on this side right here, you might see that there's a little bit of distortion. Again, there's always going to be a little bit of distortion. It's almost unavoidable. But to be honest, for something organic like this piece right here, it's perfectly fine. So I would say that this piece is now ready. Like this is a good piece, and it's working perfectly fine. Once I have this, we're going to talk about the mirroring UVs later on, but once I have this, we're just going to like mirror to the other side. So let's go to another piece. Let's say, for instance, this guy. This guy is super, super simple. It's just a cylinder, right? And this one already has some UVs. If we take a look at the face mode, you're gonna see that the UVs are there, but they're not proportional. So since the UVs are already there and they're actually like working nicely, the only thing we need to do here is unwrap. And by unwrapping, we should be getting, oh, in this case it didn't work. Actually, first we need to Control A and just apply all transforms. Now let's try UV and unwrap. There we go. So as you can see, the unwrap is not working. We're not getting the result that we want. And that's because we probably don't have the seams that we want. So in this case, I am just going to do another cut again. So I'm just going to say UV, or just grab all of the faces. There we go. Let me turn on screencast. There we go. So grab all the faces with A and then say UV, and we're going to do another project from view. We get the cylinder. There we go. We grab one edge, like this one right here. Usually it's the edge that's like on the side or on the inside. I'm actually going to go for the inside of the blade right here because the blade is going to be hiding most of this thing right there. I'm going to say UV and mark seam. We grab all the faces and we do UV and unwrap. And there we go. Now we get a very clean UV. Look at that. The only problem with this UV is that it's flipped. For some reason, it's flipped to the other side. You can see that the letters are wrong. So that's the kind of stuff that we need to like try to fix. I'm going to select all of the faces here on the elements. And if we go to UV, there should be, there's usually is a mirror UV here. So we're going to transform. And where is it? Mirror on the x-axis. There we go. So we mirrored it on the x-axis. And now the letters that we're seeing are all like properly laid out. So yeah, that's it. We got one piece ready, two pieces ready. What I recommend for this particular process, I don't want to do another collection of like UV readies or whatever. So I'm just gonna start hiding them. As soon as I got the pieces ready, I'm just gonna hide them. Let's go to this piece, for instance. Now, if you remember, this piece was symmetrical. So since this piece is symmetrical, one of the things that we should do is we should be deleting half of it. Okay, so we're gonna go over here and delete half of the faces. Make sure that we're deleting all of the half faces right there. And there we go. Now this, should we do some sort of like cut to alleviate a little bit of the pressure? Because of course we can just go grab all of the faces and say UV, again, project from view, and then UV unwrap. And that's gonna work fine. It's not perfect, but it's fine, especially all along the frontal side. That's really, really good. Like I really like that distribution. But as we get to the end, you can see that there's a lot of stretching here on the caps of the element, like here and here. And we can actually like help the whole thing a little bit more if we were to cut some elements right here. But to be honest, I don't think we really need to do it. I was gonna do it on this piece, but it's really not worth it because everything else looks so clean. So we're gonna keep it exactly like this. Like we're not gonna do any changes. This piece is also ready as well. Let's go with another one. Let's go with something a little bit more complex, like this one right here. So this one right here is also symmetrical, which means that we're gonna go to top view. We're gonna go to object mode, wireframe, select all of the faces on one side, and delete the faces. Now this one's a little bit different because the poles here do not flow nicely. So if I were to select all of the faces and do a project from view and do a UV unwrap, you can see that there's a lot of tension here. Like there's a lot of distortion going towards the top. So in this particular case, I am gonna select this top line right here and this bottom line right here. And I'm gonna say UV and we're gonna mark seam. So now if we go to the faces and we unfold or unwrap, you're gonna see that this thing relaxes a little bit more. And look at how the distribution changes and we get lines that are a little bit straighter and they follow the form a little bit better. This is the kind of stuff that you will get with practice, but I would say there's three main sort of shapes that you're gonna find in the 3D world. The first one is a cylinder, okay, cylindrical looking shapes, or like that one that's like an ellipse. When you have cylindrical looking shapes, usually you're gonna cut one of the caps, the other one of the caps, and then one line across. That's usually how we cut cylindrical shapes. If you have a cubical shape, let's say we have like a dice or something, depending on how complex the shape is, you might need to do this in a sort of like T or cross way. So we go down, down, up, to the side, and then around, and you're gonna get this sort of like T shape with the 6 faces of your element, like this. Okay, I think it's one more, like that. So that's a very common. Sometimes you get like a cross as well. It depends. If you have an object that's very thin, we're gonna see this in the armor. Let's say like a TB or something like that. What's usually gonna happen is you're gonna cut this through the middle, like the blade of the axe. Okay. And finally, spheres, if you have spherical objects or things like that, you're usually going to cut across the back of the sphere like this. Okay, and this thing is going to unfold into a kind of like weird shape. It generates kind of like this like Batman sign sort of thing, like this. Usually with a lot of distortion on the posts, but again, those are like the more common shapes that we're gonna be unfolding. But in general, when you're thinking about unfolding something, you need to think about what is the best way in which I can get a flat surface of my object. Let's go, for instance, to the spikes. Spikes are a really cool one. So first things first, I'm gonna go to object mode, select all the faces, UV, and do a project from view to get a clean new like slate. Then I'm gonna go to the edges and I'm gonna start adding edges from the bottom. Just grab one edge from the bottom. These are very, very simple polygons, so we just need to cut this, and we're cutting them on the bottom. Why? Because that's the part that we're gonna be seeing the least, right? So we go UV and we mark seam. We grab all of the faces and say UV and unwrap. And there we go. We have all the individual spikes and we get a very, very nice distribution. We're gonna worry about like making sure they're all lining up to the same size and stuff like that later on. But for now, we're just doing, again, the basic unwrap and unfold. This one's a really good one. For instance, this one's also symmetrical. So if we wanna save ourselves some UV space, we're also gonna go here and delete half of it. So delete the faces. And since we are left with a very flat effect, very flat surface, some of you might be like, well, we really don't need to cut this, right? Because if we cut this, we're gonna get like the same thing. And yes, like we can just grab this. Let's go to face mode. Let's grab all the faces, UV, let's do a project from view, UV, unwrap, and this looks okay. It looks good. However, I know that there's a lot of stress going on this particular edge right here. This particular edge could benefit from being marked as well. So if I mark that edge, select everything and say UV and then unwrap, that little cut right there, it might not seem like much, but it's really going to help with the, like the, what's the word? Distortion of the texture. Look at that. Really, really good. And again, later on, one of the things that we're going to be doing is, of course, rotating all of these things right here so that everything is pointing or facing in the same direction. So it's a lot easier for people to read the map. That's why it's called a map, because when we read this, we should be able to tell what's happening on the object itself as well. So that one is ready. Let's go with this one. This one is a very simple one. It looks like a cylinder. It's pretty much a cylinder. So let's grab all of the faces, UV. Let's do a project from view. And then we're going to go to edge mode. I'm going to select all of these edges on the top. They're not a clean edge loop, so I'm going to have to like manually select the 6 sides of the cylinder, which are the caps. This is pretty much like a cylinder, like caps of a cylinder. And now I don't want to go through the middle. I'm just going to go through the side. I'm going to grab one of these lines on the side to use it as I say cut section. So unwrap, or sorry, not unwrap, UV, mark seam. We go to all of the elements and we say unwrap. And there we go. We get this very nice like stripe, which is the side of our element, and we get the 2 caps of our object. Now this stripe right here, technically we could also straighten it up so that it's completely straight. However, I think people worry a little bit too much about that. Unless you're doing product design or things like that where you're gonna have a pattern that's gonna be very obvious, this sort of stuff is really not that bad. Like you can definitely work with this. So yeah, in this case, since we're not gonna go super complicated with the textures, I think this is more than enough. So let's hide that one. And as you can see, little by little, we are we're getting rid, or we're advancing here on our textures. I'm just gonna do one more right here, and then I'm gonna leave the armor because the armor is a little bit more complex for last. So let's do the hammer real quick. So for the hammer, we're gonna go UV. Let's select everything, UV. We're gonna do a project from view. There we go. And then the cube, remember the cube, how we mentioned that it's usually cut in this sort of like a cross section, where I'm gonna go to the seam lines, and I'm gonna select this back part right here, all of this back line, and I'm gonna mark that seam, UV, mark seam. And then I'm gonna follow the corners, because this was originally a cube, right? So if we follow the corners, we should be able to create a sort of like cross thing right there. Again, UV and mark seams. And now we select all of the elements and we do UV unwrap. as you can see, we're gonna get this very nice cross section. Again, some people might ask, well, why don't we go across this thing so we got like 6 individual faces? Remember that we want to try to avoid having as many cuts as possible, and this is one way in which we can avoid that. So yeah, that's it. Look at that, looking really, really, really good. It's going to be pretty much impossible for all of these lines to, or of these elements to be perfectly in line, so there will be a little bit of distortion here and there. And yes, we have these cut lines right here, which are very obvious, but once we go into Substance Painter, which is the software that we're going to be using for texturing, I'll show you how you can hide them very, very nicely. So yeah, that's it. As you can see, with that, we're pretty much done with all of the big parts of our element, and now we just need to do some more unwrap right here on the armor. So I'm gonna do this next unwrap on the next video, and after that, we're gonna go through the layout process. We're gonna start like making sure that everything is laid out as nicely as possible in our element, and we're gonna be preparing for our bigs. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one. Bye bye.